Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast where I bring you the best and the brightest in the world of business, marketing, and entrepreneurship to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. My guest today on the podcast is Chris Meroff. Chris is a CEO, founder, author, and serial entrepreneur with a passion for helping business professionals find fulfillment in their work through sustainable success. And we will certainly unpack that. And Chris started a business with his family just at the age of 22. Trying to see if there's any Succession comparisons here. Well, I don't know if you watch that show. We're into it now. And followed the true entrepreneur's arc of working every job within that company as they grew. And he worked in the family biz for 15 years before setting out on his own to Austin, Texas in 2011 to start fresh. Chris worked on MSB Consulting to provide Medicaid consulting services to school districts up until February of this past year, where he exited the business. Now, Chris focuses on his DCX Community to help people become leaders, build teams that promote fulfillment in one's work. He's also an active investor dating back to 2019 and spends his time between Austin and Maine, where he is now, where he runs his own farm, which I'm certainly curious about. Believe it or not, Chris has a ton going on outside of that intro, and I'm looking forward to unpacking it. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. We were chatting beforehand. We tried 3 times to get this. He had technical
Yeah.
issues. We tried to record on Monday. My office here, they were doing some construction, and they're like, "Hey, the internet might be in and out today." I'm like, "I can't record my show," but I was like, "That." So 3rd time's a charm. I'm excited to do this. So Chris, let's do it. I want to start off with the family business. We're going to talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit, which I understand was tell me if I'm right here, paired schools with federal funding to provide aid and special services to children with disabilities. How does that come about? I'm always interested in how these
Yeah.
needs come.
Yeah. So my parents, both long careers in industries. My dad worked in the tech field for a company called Digital Equipment Corporation, which back in the 80s was like a competitor to IBM. And I think we all know who won that
Mm,
battle. But he worked for them for 20 years. And then my mom, educator, teacher, administrator. And so it's actually through, and they, by the way, wanted, and for years were looking for a business to do together.
hmm,
After, finding success, but not really finding fulfillment at work. And so they finally, my mom got introduced to a couple who were doing this consulting business in the area of special education. And so my mom immediately kind of put 2 and 2 together and was like, well, hey, listen, this couple, the wife was in tech, the husband in education, was like, hey, that's kind of like the mirror image of
right.
us. And
You're
so,
inspired.
yeah, teach me how to do it. And so in a neighboring state, which is the state of Maine, they launched that business back in '96. So yeah, that's how we got into it.
It's always interesting to hear how their stories unpack. Both my parents, New York City Board of Ed teachers, but they stayed down that path and they went through it for 30 years. Now happily retired. So I heard the story. And correct me if I'm wrong. Where your mom handed you a 4-inch thick Medicaid handbook and said, "Have at it." What was that like when she threw that behemoth at you?
Well, so the backstory to that is I did not. I went to college for maybe a year, and so I'm like, I just don't feel like I'm a traditional learner, which was code for I feel like I'm an idiot. I don't feel like I'm a classroom kid. Struggled all through school to figure out how to get by so I could play my sports and be in the activities, but I didn't really get along with school very well. And so when I went to
Interesting.
work for my parents, she hands me this 4-inch binder, and all my nightmares are coming true
No,
around.
don't.
Yeah, what do I have to do? Like I have to learn all these, and it's
Oh
like
no.
boring regulation stuff. And so I just remember thinking at that moment, I'm like, is this like, am I going to really do this? I've got handed this opportunity from my parents. I had been selling cars previous to that, and so I'm
Did you
like, do I
enjoy
want to
that?
go
Did
down?
did did you enjoy selling cars? Are you a car
I
guy?
did. I know. I mean, I
Hmm.
enjoy cars, but I enjoyed the money I could make, but I didn't necessarily love the process. I felt a
Right.
little gross about that. And so they offered me to join them in this journey. And so I thought I was going to be kind of like the sales guy and get out there and do some
The
training
front of the
maybe.
organization, the front
Yeah.
face. Yeah.
And so when they handed me the notebook, when I'm like, oh my gosh. And so it took me about 6 months to really come to grips with like, what are my opportunities? I already had little kids at home at that point. And so I'm like, who am I going to be to these kids? And like, I've got this opportunity. I need to step up and take the bull by the horns here. And so, yeah, that was kind of what led to me kind of diving in to learn all these regulations, both from a health and human services side and an education side, which is as boring as it sounds.
So let's pause there and kind of think about that for a moment here. Looking back on that time in your life, like what advice would you give someone else in that position now,
Yeah.
knowing what you know now?
Well, I
Like
think John Maxwell says it really well. He's like, he has this story where he's got this kid who walks up to him after one of the conferences that he spoke at, and he says, "Man, I want to do what you do." And John Maxwell smiles and looks at him. He says, "I get it, but are you willing to do what I did?" And so I think
to
that's
get here.
really
Yep.
the to get here. It's like the grind. We all have this maybe mindset of what we want in life, but are we really willing to go through the hard work, the grind to get there?
Let's pause on that and kind of go deep because I think that's a really interesting point right now in this day of social media where people are only seeing either the end result of that hard work, right? Like you see that graphic, like the tip of the iceberg, but you don't see what's under
That's
the
right.
waterline, or you're seeing these fake optics, right? People with their fancy watches standing in front of
Yeah.
the private jets and everything. It takes work, right? And you can
Yeah.
look at any athlete, you can look at any top performer out there. This
That's
isn't
right.
it's this crazy society of thinking of instant success. And I mean, I blame social media. I
That's
truly
right.
do. I think that it's a false narrative. It's these kids that think that they could just go on and create this image and be insanely rich. And it sucks. I mean, what's your hot take on it?
That's right. Yeah, it's a really a pandemic of kind of. I think people live out of a missed expectation. Like they have an expectation of success based on what they see in social media, and so they're already starting from behind. They're already like, well, I'm not a millionaire yet, and I
Mm,
see all these other people, and I think millennials really struggled with that for a long time, feeling like they've already missed the boat. They're like 32, and they're like, yeah, man, I'm a failure already because, and I think it's because of social media. I think you hit the
100%.
nail on the head. I mean, look at your podcast, and you're like, okay, we were talking before, and you're like, I'm almost at 300. We do a podcast, and I'm telling you, they are hard work. It's a grind, and so
Grind
you
is the
know,
word.
yeah, it's people they'll see this and they'll be like, oh, that looks fun, you're just interviewing people. They will have no idea until they get in
The
there and
work.
have to figure out the work that it takes. And so I just think generationally, it's not on us. Maybe I'm a Gen X. It's not on me to criticize Millennial and Gen Z. It's on me to like, encourage them and to teach them and to bring them along.
Are we the old men in the room now? Are we our parents? Do you ever like? How old are you, Chris? May I ask?
I am 49. I turned 50 in 1 month.
I'm 44, so I'm a couple steps behind you. Um,
Yeah.
have you had had these moments recently? Because I was looking at some pictures of family pictures from when my dad was almost my age, and I don't know. I feel younger and different. Like, are we? Is that just usually what happens with generations? Like, I don't feel 44. Like, I like
No.
what does it even
I
feel
know.
like? Like when you
I
compare
feel
your
like I'm a
parents at
kid.
44, like what?
Yeah. Well, my we were just talking about this. My dad was 47 when I started working for them. So he's younger, but
Mhm.
at 22, I looked at him as an this old man. I'm like, I can't believe I'm older than he was at that time. It's crazy.
Oh, it's crazy. So let's fast forward a little bit. What was that decision process to leave the family business? Was
Yeah.
it a conversation was it over a long period of time, or did something happen? And what was that conversation like? It had to be hard.
Yeah, it was really, really hard, and it was hard for maybe different reasons than you might be thinking. So here I am. I've put in this hard work, and I've invested every ounce of who I am into this business. Again, thinking it's my only opportunity in life, and no education, and so I'm like, I gotta dig in and make this work. So I kind of was a little blindsided, even though we had for the past year been really arguing a lot. My parents now were older and thinking about retirement, playing it safe. I'm like in my mid 30s, wanting to go for it. And so we just had a lot of conflict for the year leading up to it. But I just figured, hey, they're my parents, it's family. I'm going to be here forever. And then I'm down in Arizona. We by that point I've been doing consulting and work in 15 other states all over the U.S. And so I was down in Arizona. I get a call from my dad, and he's like, "Hey, when you get back, I'd like to grab some breakfast with you in the morning." And so, knowing growing up with my dad, he's never asked me to breakfast in the morning, especially
Mm,
one on one. So I'm like, okay, there's got to be
Something's up.
something going on. Yeah. When I get back, we meet. He's like, hey, what if and we had just started in Texas. We had maybe like 5 contracts. He's like, hey, what if we sold you, these 5 contracts and then you were able to launch out on your own? And so I'm like, okay, this is out of nowhere, but what a great opportunity. Again, this is exciting. And I get to now, instead of critiquing and criticizing the organization they had built, I get to
Build your
do
own.
this, build my own. Well, I got home and started talking to my wife, and she wasn't super excited. We raised our kids in New England, and we've got 4 at home. We're
Your
like
roots are
gonna
there.
rip
Yeah.
them out of everything that they're used to
Yeah. It's
and
tough.
move down there. So I arranged, because I am sales, I arranged this wonderful trip in March when the weather in Texas is absolutely gorgeous,
Look at
to bring my
this.
wife down to like convince her this is a great move. And while we're down there, it hit me out of nowhere. This is again how oblivious I was, that I'm getting kicked out of my family business. Like, this is just a very nice, kind way
Sounds
for
like
my parents to
Succession. Sounds like a
say
nice version of Succession right
this
here.
isn't working. Yeah. So that's when I'm like, okay,
Some Kendall
this is
Roy action.
real. Yep, and I gotta figure this out. And so that's kind of how that came about.
All right. So now you're out and you're transitioning to MSB, right? That's
MSB, that's it.
right. And what does
Yep.
MSB stand for?
So, long story short, it started as Maine state billing, then it went to multi-state billing, and then I would tease all the school districts in Texas. I said it stands for educational excellence, and they're like, that doesn't work with the letters. And I'm like,
No,
I know,
let's just
forget the letters.
keep it
I,
simple.
yeah, I think it's War Dogs or one of those movies where they're like, IBM doesn't stand for anything. He's like, yes, it does.
Yes,
He
it.
fires him on the spot.
That's
But
that's kind of
anyway,
funny.
yeah, it's kind of this idea that MSB really stood for this kind of legacy company that I had bought. But yeah, it was
But
really about Medicaid billing.
so you're going out on your own. But what was something that you wanted to do different than your parents' business? Something that you want,
So
like you saw them doing. Maybe you weren't
yeah,
vocal about it, Chris, and like I don't know, like it's kind of working. But you know what? If I ever do this thing on my
yeah,
own, this is what I would do differently.
yep. So the biggest one for me was growing up in my house. My parents were amazing parents. They taught me I had value, intrinsic value, and it didn't matter what grades I got, what instrument I played, what sports I played. Like, I mattered. In fact, it was so helpful to me that even as a chubby middle school kid, like when kids would pick on me, I just never felt bullied. My parents just gave me such incredible,
It's great.
uh, confidence in just me as a person. But when I went to work for them,
Hmm.
all of a sudden I got exposed to like this command and control style leadership that was really about, my value was then determined based on my production or my success. And every day I might show up and they'd be super happy with me because I got a sale, and the next day, one got away and then they're disappointed in me, and it really rocked me, because of the real dichotomy between my childhood and the work experience. So when I launched in Texas, I'm like, no, I'm gonna remove a lot of the subjectivity around my employees' understanding of their own success. I'm gonna remove that and make sure they feel valued for who they are, and not just what they do.
I absolutely love that. And what was one of those first major roadblocks that you had when you launched your own business? Maybe it was a misconception. Maybe you came out of the
Yeah.
gate, strong. Maybe you over or undercompensated on something.
Well, the biggest one, is in this process of trying to create an organization that was really value based. I made a company that was completely customer centric. And I know that doesn't sound like a mistake to make, but I'm telling you, it really set me up for future failure. So for the first 4 years, being very customer centric, we found great success. I won't lie, we blew up. We went from 3 employees to 70 employees. I went from bringing in $150,000 to about $12 million a year,
It's awesome.
and was like, man, I knew it. Like, I proved it. I've proven that this system works when I really try to become really customer centric. But what was missing was the fact that me as a leader, it moved me into this corner, where I just constantly felt paranoid, and I felt constantly betrayed by everyone when they would leave, or when things wouldn't go well. It's like I let them find maybe some fulfillment, but as a leader, I was completely unfulfilled. I realized for the first time in my life I was completely emotionally alone. And so that was devastating to find the success that I'd been like striving for, only to feel like I don't want any of it. This isn't worth it.
I want to talk about that a little bit, emotionally alone, and I think that's a very interesting piece that we don't really talk about for first time leaders. I've
Yeah,
certainly felt that at times. I feel like I feel that now at times, emotionally
that's
alone,
right.
especially as a solopreneur when you don't have the benchmarks, you don't have someone to bounce it off of, and you're so focused on ensuring that everyone else is happy around you except yourself.
You got it. And you're
And
taught, I was taught, like you got to be a strong, confident leader, and it's your job to take care of everyone. Like
uh,
that's what
uh,
I was just taught.
it's like I'm a dad with my business. I'm a dad at home. It's like, what about me? Right? Like,
You got it.
when is it okay? When is it okay not to be okay? And I mean, we could talk about that for a long time, and that comes with,
Yeah,
and it's also hard to separate business success and failure from personal success and failure,
that's right.
and understanding the concept of cash flow and money, and not letting ups and downs of money affect your day to day life.
Yeah,
It's hard going through that now,
very
man.
difficult.
It's a tough one, and I also want to talk about something personal that happened, which is business, right? Like your business partner and best friend, without notice, right after the company Christmas party, resigned. I'd love if you could
That's
share
right.
that story.
Yeah, it was one of those moments where we had our company Christmas party. I'm sitting there. This is again after year four. We had hit every benchmark I could have possibly set for myself, and we're reflecting on it that night, and we're like, man, I'm just so thrilled of where we are.
Mhm.
And then the very next morning, I get his 2 week notice, and this is right before Christmas, and so it really wasn't 2 weeks. We literally were shut down for a couple weeks over Christmas, and we were traveling back north to New Hampshire, and I'm just devastated. I'm like, what happened? And I knew that he had been now looking for the last 9 months and didn't
Right, and
tell
that
me.
pisses you off.
I got so angry.
But how would you have handled it
Uh,
differently if you knew though? What if he came to you and said, "This isn't working out for X, Y, and Z reasons. I want to stay and keep the business moving, but I'm going to be honest. I'm going to start looking."
yeah, that's where I think the reality of like who I was being very customer centric versus being employee centric. I don't know that he had a choice
Hmm.
because I would have done anything I needed to make sure my customers were taken care of. And what I wasn't in the position at that moment was thinking I'll do anything to make sure I'll take care of my employees. And again, it's not that I was a terrible boss or leader. I just wasn't a vulnerable boss or leader. There was no and could be no real relationship beyond what we do because I just wasn't willing to open up. And so I had been meeting with a guy in my community every week to really try to figure out like how am I going to show up and be more empathetic. And I just wasn't raised that way, so it just didn't even dawn on me that somebody would need empathy. I'm a
Well,
fixer by nature, so
yeah.
it's not even so. But I wanted to learn it for my wife's sake, for my kids' sake, for my employees' sake. But I remember right after Jason, my best friend, left, met with this guy, and he's like, "Hey, who would you share your deepest hurts and fears with?" Now, I immediately lied. I'm like, oh, I got my wife, I've got good friends, I would share that with anybody. But I knew inside there is no way that I'm going to be able to share with people what I'm afraid of, or what hurts me, or what pain I'm feeling. That is not on the cards for me. You suck it up, you man up,
Figure
you
it
you
out.
move on. Yeah, you figure it out. Like
Figure shit
you don't.
out.
Yep, you don't put this on another human being. That's not what a strong, confident leader does. And so that was my moment of ultimate low, I think.
And we're gonna get to this because that's how I wrap up my show at the end. But I want to bring it up now. Like when you're at your lowest, right? When you're at that rock bottom, and I've been there multiple times, and there's no stronger foundation to build on than rock bottom, than rock
Yeah,
foundation.
that's
So
right.
at that moment, what was that epiphany to pull yourself up, Chris?
So I'm driving home after he asked me the question, and again, I convert all emotion, every single one, to anger. So I'm just in my car, and
Jeez, I
I
feel
am,
you, man. I feel you on
yeah,
that one.
it is
Everything's
my safe
rage.
space. It gives me a false sense of control. So I'm in my car and I am so ticked. I'm ticked at the traffic, and then I'm pissed off with the guy for asking me the question. Then I'm really pissed off with Jason for leaving. I'm angry at my family for not loving me. Well, then of course it lands always on me, the guilt and the
Mm-hmm.
shame of like, well, dude, it's because you are not a vulnerable person. You never let anyone know what's really going on inside. And so it dawned on me that I was living in a prison of my own making. And it wasn't my wife's fault. It wasn't my family's fault. But I literally don't ever talk to them about the hurts and the fears and the emotions that are obviously inside of me as a human being. And so it was that point of recognition, and the tears flowed. It was the first time as an adult male at 42
Yeah,
that
dude.
I cried and wept.
And
And it
and,
was at
and
that moment I'm like, I am one broken human being.
we're human, we're fallible, right?
Yeah,
We're and it builds up, and it's hard,
it
and
does.
if you don't get it out, I mean, I cry a bunch, and I let my
Yeah.
emotions out, and it usually comes at a moment of joy where I
Yep.
finally feel good about something that I could release the negative energy. And I
That's
do it a
right.
couple times a year. It comes at weird times. It could come in the middle of a concert. It could come with hanging out with friends. And like I could tell when it happens with friends, those friends really care because they're not there laughing at me. They're embracing
Yeah.
and being
That's
part of
right.
it. And it's tough because you can't keep them bottled up inside.
No.
And being a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, business owner, like the weight is heavy, heavy as a crown.
It yeah.
When you have to kill what you eat every single
Yeah.
day, and you're managing people and expectations and other people's livelihoods, it's heavy.
It's very heavy. And for me, the idea of like not having good mental health, it wasn't really a thing in my mind. Like it couldn't happen to me because I'm not, this severely outwardly broken person. But when you bottle it up, you start to believe all kinds of lies. And so I
Mhm.
became an incredibly paranoid human because I just viewed all of their actions through this hurt lens, and hurt people hurt people. And so it was in that moment of realizing, like, this is not the legacy I want for my company. And then I'm like, this isn't the legacy I want for my marriage or my relationship
No.
with my kids. Like, I need to break this cycle. And so for me, it was in that moment really figuring out I've done well from a business perspective, and the world's definition of success um, being a customer centric company. But what I really need to be is a people centric company, a people centric husband. I know it sounds weird, but a people centric dad. Like
Mhm.
these are humans. And guess what? Showing up strong and confident every day, all it does is it make everyone around me feel like they're unneeded. And when people feel like they're unneeded in your life, they really can't take care of you the way that you're desperate. I was desperate for somebody to take care of me. I'm just a little kid inside, and I just wanted somebody to take care of me because it's exhausting taking care of everyone all the time. But I never gave him a chance because here's Mr. Strong, here's Mr.
Exactly.
Confident, larger than life
And
personality. They had no space.
it's this feeling, I'm sure you could relate to it. It's like I can never take my foot off the gas.
That's right.
The second I took my foot off the gas, the entire machine stops.
That's right.
I mean, I
It's
could
all
potentially
dependent
slow
on me.
down at times, but if I slow down, then it's gonna be a flywheel of fail, right? Like, I
You
have
got
to
it.
keep it going. So you have to
Yep.
find these moments of clarity. You have to find these moments to relax and unwind. And how did this epiphany translate into the way you started to build and manage your business moving forward?
Yeah, so it really helped me understand like I need to become really employee centric, and I realized that I'm the glass ceiling.
Hmm,
Like the organization, I am the organization, and I keep everyone where they are because I try to protect them. So I really had to pivot away from being responsible for people and being responsible to people. And so it took me about a year to kind of test the waters of vulnerability. And so I remember the very first time that I'm driving down the road, and a relatively new employee, they could tell I'm not right. And I'm still, by the way, again, this wasn't this moment of tears, and then all of a sudden I'm this new dude. It was like a 12-month process, and about 3 months into it, she's like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm fine." Well, fine, good, and okay are my favorite responses because I don't have to answer anything. And so she pressed. She's like, "Well, it seems like you're kind of off. What's happening? Is there anything that we want to talk about?" We finally get to the school district where we're stopping off. I'm training her on sales, and we get there, and she looks at me. Well, she asked me one more time. She's like, "Are you sure you're okay?" And I get out of the car and I looked at her and I'm like, "No, I'm not okay." And all she did was like, "I'm so sorry." And then we had to go into the school district and do our spiel. And it was baby steps. And really that's what it took. It took me to test the waters. I'm like, holy crap, this person didn't just run away screaming. She leaned in. And I'm like, that's not what I
Yeah.
was expecting. I was expecting for people to flee, thinking, this is this weak, emotionally unstable, again, the lies that we tell ourselves. And the reality was, no, they stepped up and into who I needed them to be in ways I could have never imagined.
That's tremendous, and I applaud, appreciate your vulnerability and sharing it, because I think the more we share and talk about that it's okay to not be okay, and we take
Yeah,
down this facade, especially with male bravado, machismo, and
you
this
got it.
kind of old patriarch version of leadership, and father, what it means to be a father and a dad and a business leader, it changes
Yeah,
everything. I mean, we're living in a whole new world, and it's healthier. It's healthier to express it and showing sign. It's not a sign of weakness to ask for help.
no, no. In fact, it's an act of strength, and so that's really where after that year of really pivoting into being employee centric, it went well beyond that. It went into for me to understand, like I wield power, being the owner, and so what was I going to do to encourage my people to step up and into higher levels of responsibility? Well, without just abandoning them. And so what I did is I really kind of focused on this idea of I'm going to trade in every meeting, in every conversation. I'm going to make a trade. I'm going to trade away my power for their greatness. And I really started to define what that greatness was, which are really about soft skills. It's about kindness, compassion, loyalty, patience, faithfulness, all these things, dedication, hard work. I wanted to trade my power for their greatness. And when I did that, they rose up in ways that I could never have imagined.
Can you give us an example of that? What would that? Let's do a hypothetical, because I want to
Yeah.
understand how that would work in real life.
Yeah. So there'd be a meeting, for instance, we'll be talking about solving a problem. Well, strong, confident Chris comes in and he's like, and also a incredibly fast processor, was raised by parents who taught me how to critically think. And so here's the problem, work through it. I was always the first to speak. Well, then when you have a list of solutions on the board, the one that is written by my name always seems to win.
Hmm.
And it's probably not the best idea. So then I had to kind of pull the Simon Sinek, which was be the last to speak. And that's me trading my power, the unspoken power, for their greatness. And I would then no longer solve problems, but kind of tease out of them solutions to
Love that.
problems.
Taking mental notes here. I'm taking mental notes here. So I want to keep this moving here. What was the decision to move on from that business into the next
Yeah,
phase?
so in 2018, 2019. So from the time I switched from being client centric to employee centric, was about a 3 year period. So 4 years, great success, but then switched to being employee, and then my company tripled in size. So all of a sudden, this glass ceiling broke. People rose up, took it to heights and levels I never could have
Love it.
imagined. So in 2018, at the latter part of 18 into 19, started to pull money out, capital out of that business because we were so successful to launch my venture capital firm to figure out kind of new means or other ways that we could employ the community, which is my heartbeat as an entrepreneur, is to provide really fulfilling employment. And so we just started pulling money out to launch in several businesses, organically bootstrapped businesses that we started in 2019 to also diversify my holdings. And that's kind of what kind of we leveraged into this next phase.
Tremendous. And that's definitely a signal of success internally, right? Like you had to think, all right, this is a sign of success where I've gotten to a point and built this business up where I could take money out of it, this business. That business is still profiting and doing well, and now start to empower and help others build.
That's
Like
right.
that has to be a
Yeah,
huge green flag for you to raise.
it's huge. And I would say that the one thing I love is that I was taught early on from an accountant the idea of what it meant to be having a wealthy mindset. And so he just taught me like a poor person's mindset is to use their money to buy trinkets. The middle class mindset is to go take their money and go buy toys. And then the wealthy mindset is to take their money and go make more money with it. And so I'm so thankful that he taught me that in my
That's
20s.
massive.
So then when we started pulling capital out, instead of buying boats and RVs and second homes and so on, that's we pivoted right into these other businesses that we bootstrapped and built from ground up.
How do you define community? Because it's different for everybody. How do you
Yeah,
define it, and what
from
is your community?
yeah, community is an ambiguous term that is used, like you said, in so many
Yeah.
different ways. But for me, it's really the people that we surround ourselves that we allow to speak truth into our lives. In fact, June being kind of this focus on men's mental health. Mental health to me is just believing a lie about yourself. At some level, there's a lie and you believe it, and then you act on that belief. Whereas community can help offset that lie. The more vulnerable we are as leaders, as dads, as husbands, the more we expose ourselves in that real community to real truth. So it's about building trust with people and then letting them speak truth into who we actually are and what our actual value is.
I love it, and that leads logically into faith-based investing. What does that mean for folks out there? I mean, let me rephrase that. It means
Yeah,
something different to everybody. What does
it
faith-based
does.
investing mean to you?
So faith-based for me is taking the basics of my faith and then working with others of a like faith and then saying, hey, let's partner together because we've already established at least one level or layer of trust
Common
because
value.
we have this value system that's aligned and we can move forward faster together than alone.
How do you manage how do you manage that in a world that can be very secular without intruding on the beliefs of others?
Yeah, I love this question. The reality is, my faith is mine. It is not here to judge others. The reality is, I don't know everything. I know that's shocking, but I don't. So I only have my
Same here,
experiences,
man.
and so because of that, I can't hold this God complex that says, okay, well, I know the best faith for everyone. I know what's best for me, and it
For
and
you.
it speaks
Hmm.
truth into who I am and how I show up. But at the end of the day, a big part of my faith is that work of Jesus. But it's so funny, this idea that God didn't send Jesus into the world to condemn the world. So why are you? It's
I
kind of,
wish be
yeah,
right. Like it's be curious, not judgmental. Right. Like
yeah,
if you want to quote Ted Lasso, right?
exactly,
Be curious. Be
yeah.
curious
Be
about people.
ever learning.
I mean, I think the and talk about soft skills before, Chris, like inquisitive. I think
That's
being
right.
inquisitive is such a
It's
massive
huge.
trait to have, and to want to understand people and not listen. We're all guilty of judgment. We're all human. Like, please, we're all
Yeah,
biases, right? But
that's right.
to want to understand people, where are you coming from with that opinion? Where are you coming from? Where is that
Yeah.
based on? And being okay with people have different opinions to some
That's a
extent. There.
core it's a core component of being employee centric. I mean,
Hmm.
if your worldview is right, and that makes everyone else's wrong, and that's just a terrible way to live. My worldview is just mine today. I hope mine tomorrow is expanded because I'm
I
curious,
agree.
because I'm a learner, and I do want to understand people. It's what gives them value, and understanding their value. It's critical.
100%. So let's talk about new book coming out October 17th. Lead, Discovering the Heart of Authentic Leadership. Do we really need another book on leadership, Chris? I mean, I mean, if I walk into any airport,
Yeah,
there's a million of them there.
there's a million of them.
Tell us
There's a
about your
million
book.
of
Why,
them.
why is it going to be different, and who's it for?
Yeah, so the book itself is kind of a memoir of my leadership journey. And so, if nothing else, it was a cathartic process of putting down in paper my journey. However, I do feel like it's a lot especially maybe men my age, but our journey and what we've been taught about leadership and really redefining what leadership looks like. I also
Love it.
say this: I am not a thought leader. People love to use that term. I'm an action leader.
Ah, big
I don't
difference.
do, yeah, I don't do any, I don't think about, maybe I should think more. I don't think about things as much. I'm a
Right.
doer. And so the book itself is really written for people who want to take actual steps. They want to do things maybe a little differently. Maybe they find themselves in a similar situation that I found myself in, and want to take steps to get out of that scenario. So that's really what the book is for.
I want to go back to, you mentioned the word cathartic. What did you learn about yourself through the process of writing the book?
Man, I learned that I still have deep hurts, like from childhood. And Even saying that out loud is like cringy to me because I just, again, the way I was raised is just, you just don't talk about these things, or the people who do I look at as weak, and it's, I'm ashamed, because it's so needed. These things are necessary to talk about and expose. Again, if nothing else, it allows truth to rise up. It's instead of a lifetime of lies that I've been telling myself. I grew up again with amazing parents, but I'd still look in the mirror at this chubby middle school kid. Well, guess what? That kid's still in the mirror. I still look at that kid in the mirror, and I have to demand that that is not who shows up at work today. This chubby, floundering, school hating kid is still the guy who shows up, unless I'm able to understand the truth of who I am today versus who I was in middle school.
Where does your confidence come from today?
It comes from the community of people around me, letting my wife and my kids and my employees and my coworkers speak that truth into me. And that comes out of my vulnerability. So when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling like I can't do it, and they speak confidence back into who I am as a human being, it's my
We
whole world.
we need that, and sometimes we need those positive affirmations. And it's not to boost the ego; it's just to remind
No.
ourselves that we've been successful in the past. We're going to be successful, and we have our moments. How do you define success these days in your life, Chris?
I define it around significance. And so the reality for me is significance is something that nobody can take away from me. Even when I'm 85 years old, I can be kind to another human,
Hmm.
and that makes me significant. And so
Oh,
I've
I
just
love it, man.
defined things so differently now than I used to.
That's tremendous. Let's bring it home here. What what is that piece of advice, that single piece of advice that you've received in your life that you repeat every day, a mantra? It could be something that you deeply believe in that keeps you focused.
The number one thing for me is to fight against what brought me to loneliness. And what brought me to loneliness is not exposing those deep hurts and fears to the people around me. So the advice I would give is, um, let people be your biggest cheerleaders. Don't let shame and guilt and kind of a false narrative of what it means to be a professional fool you into thinking that there's something better out there and you're just missing the boat. What's better is to be
Yeah.
significant.
I love it, man. And Chris, I rarely ask this question anymore, but what is your superpower, right? Like, what is this superpower that you have that makes you who you are?
I would say a combination of determination and enthusiasm. People say all the time, I have this amazing ability to galvanize a whole group of people toward a common goal. And so that's really what I embrace now as my superpower is to kind of move people in this exact same direction.
Yeah, that's tremendous. And I touched on it earlier, but I'm going to bring it home because I've asked this question to wrap up 285 plus shows. But you look back on those dark times that you've had multiple times, and you need to dig down deep and harness that inner tenacity.
Yeah,
That's the word I'm feeling here, Chris. And on the flip side, I could tell from this conversation how much gratitude you have for the life you've
yeah,
created, the family you created, this business you created, how much you've helped and empower others to be their best self. Chris
yep.
Meroff, what is your compass? What is your beacon? What is your North Star in life?
That's my faith. So it
I mean,
does
I knew the
inform
answer to
me.
that one. Sorry.
Yeah, it
I
it
saw
keeps me
that, I saw that
grounded.
one coming.
It keeps me grounded,
I didn't mean to
and
cut you off.
focused. Yep. Nope. No, that's it. That's what it does. It helps me understand again a framework, nothing more, nothing less, but a framework of how I can live and how I can serve others.
I love it, and it's about that beacon and keeping that light. And I know for me right now, like going through some tough times, like you have to have that lighthouse
You
to
do.
guide you through. You have to have that North Star where you could look up and say, "I'm still going down the right path. I still have
That's right.
something to keep me focused." Chris, I appreciate you coming on here and just being so open and vulnerable. I mean, we don't know each other, and I
Yeah.
think this is a great example of how. And I find a lot for myself too of having conversations with other men and leading by example and saying it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to be open, and it's
That's
okay
right.
to share your emotions. Everyone, please check out chrismeroff.com. His book is coming out October 17th. We will link it up in the show notes when this show drops. Where else could folks find you? Where could they connect? Where could they learn more?
Yeah, so DCXcommunity.com is a great way to connect. And then also for the listeners, for your listeners, we're offering a 15% discount. DCX Unity is the code that they can use, promo code for our conference that's coming up in October. Pat Lencioni is going to be there. Tim Tebow is going to be there.
Timmy Tebow.
Um, yeah, we are so excited. That'll be in Austin, Texas. But we're going to give a 15% discount for anybody who wants to buy a live stream ticket. DCX Unity is the promo code.
Awesome. And we'll link that up in the show notes. Chris, I appreciate you. Thank you for joining me. This has been a fantastic show. Everyone out there, if this show resonated with you, sharing means caring. It goes a long way. Leave a review, a rating. We certainly appreciate it. Remember, you can find out more and follow all of our episodes and social media at thepozcast.com. We'll link you up there. Remember, be good to yourself and be better to others. Look out for one another. Take care and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.